All right. Welcome back from the break. Hopefully you enjoyed the sunshine, had a good coffee. And now we're getting technical. No, just kidding. Actually, we are getting... Oh, am I so... Like here? Okay. We'll talk about technology, but it won't be too technical, right? So it's the idea that we have this nice flow of keynotes this morning, and you've already seen, the company perspective, you've seen a consulting perspective, and now we will take it one level up and talk about decision making, right? So going back from the operational challenges, just talking about that. It's a lot of stuff to digest, so we'll try to make it simple and clear. And it's not supposed to be a lecture, but hopefully there's a lot of takeaways for you to learn. The title, you might wonder, why did we come up with the title? The title is a mistake. So we started to plan this event in January, and it was like, okay, we need something about decision intelligence technology, like what it is and why it's useful. Unfortunately, I never managed to come up with a proper title. So when the first marketing mail got out, that was the title then. So that's why we have what it is and why it's useful. And that's exactly the topic. All right? You've heard it before. The usual look at Gurobi, the company or the product, is an engine. So now that we have the technology keynote, we should probably talk about the engine. We will not talk about the engine, right? So that's the idea. The engine is, of course, at the center of all those great use cases that we will see today and tomorrow. And today we will give you a break from the engine details and really talk about all the surroundings about decision making. And then the engine is the technology, right? Good. We, as a company, we're usually very proud of our, brain power. You've seen it on the number slide, number of PhDs. I mean, not many companies have a sales director coming on stage and talking about the number of PhDs. For us, it's different. So yes, we are a very technical company, but since what you've learned is we've broadened our vision a little. So decision intelligence technology is so much more than just the engine. So the idea is really that we use the opportunity today and add some more light. I'm happy to share the state. You've learned 18 minutes is what makes a perfect presentation. We know math, so we are 2, so we will roughly be at 40 minutes. So it will be an engaging presentation, right? It's perfectly like 40 minutes, so that's the plan. With me on stage is Ronald van der Velden, with Gurobi now for 2 years, and Ronald has been working for the last decade on implementing decision intelligence technology. So he's the personification of the talk, and I'm happy to share the stage. We'll do the presentation together. Over to you.
Cool. And we have Kostja also. Kostja is the global head of technical account management. So he's my boss, so I better do a good job here. But more importantly, he did the same thing as I did, implementing advanced planning solutions, but much more. Also being a lecturer, he loves talking, he loves explaining stuff, and he loves connecting like broader concepts. When you ask Kostja a question, you get
too much
an answer. So we're going to do that in the 40 minutes. It's actually pretty cool because now we can connect technology with all the other stuff that's also relevant. So we're going to try and do that together. So let's talk about the plan for this presentation. We're going to do it a little bit in 3 parts. So first part is going to be fundamentals. It's just about when we say decisions, what is it? It's so easy to just assume everyone knows what we're talking about. Let's take a step back. Let's first talk about decisions and why that is complex and why you might need technology, why it's not easy. Then we can talk about a little bit more structure. So if you would take decisions, how do you fit that in a process? How do you make that a flow and not just a random thing on a Wednesday morning? And that should then help you, let's say, appreciate a little bit more why technology can help. And then we're going to look at examples that show that it can actually be done. And that this is not just a story about a philosophical reality, but this is being done, it can be done, and it's super cool. Okay. So we actually made it super easy for ourselves, so we cannot forget the storyline: decisions, intelligence, technology. Let's start with decisions. Let's say you work for a furniture company, which might have a yellow and blue logo. Then you need to design a cabinet. Where do you start? Right? What is the first decision that you take if you need to design a thing like this? I was actually surprised, but it turns out the first decision is this. That was the first decision made before they designed the whole thing. They didn't know the color, they didn't know exactly what the shape should be, but they decided 119 by 38. That yellow-blue company is super focused on a mission that says something like, we want to deliver affordable furniture to as many people as we can. And that means transportation cost must be as low as possible. The cool thing is a Euro pallet is 120 by 80, meaning if you start from that position and you want to fit 2 of your cabinets on that Euro pallet, then that's your first decision, right? And it has a huge impact on the rest of the design of that cabinet, but that's where it started. So sometimes the impact of the first decision is super clear, right? If the size is right, then it fits on the pallet. Sometimes it's more complex.
Yeah, but it also means long-lasting decisions, right? That is something that you cannot easily change. So we're trying to motivate decision-making here, yeah? That's one part. But the other part is, and that is usually where the engine comes in, is complexity, right? So we, of course, took a Dutch railway example, of course. It's, you know, in the operation of such a railway network, you handle disruptions like every day. It happens all the time. You could say, well, then it's simple, right? We have a station here and we fix it. We just replace the train and it's all done. But the problem with such a network is you have what you usually call the butterfly effect. A little tiny change on the left, and what happens then? The whole thing doesn't work anymore. So a tiny change propagates into the whole network. And the problem is this goes beyond what our brains are capable to do. So complexity, it's a well-known concept usually to computer scientists and mathematicians, right? So complexity, you learn this combinatorial stuff, but it's a hard thing for most people, because realizing that your brain is not capable to handle something is always challenging. And then even more, realizing that a non-living thing, a computer, a technology can help you is even worse, right? So little fixes here. Have downstream complexity. You better have someone on your side to look at that complexity and give you an idea of whether you're doing the right thing. Yeah? You know the story about how computer learned to play chess, right? It's the idea that you can look ahead many steps, and at some point you can do this at a much higher capacity than any human brain. So long story short, computers can do better because they can look at complexity in a whole different way. The traditional way of looking at technology and decision making is somehow split into a time segment. You don't read this slide. It's a Gartner slide. It's an overview of typical how you segment decision making on the executive level down to fully automated. On the duration level, you can also do this in a different way. Not how long the decision process itself takes, but more like what's the effect of the decision, how far into the futures do we go? And usually you segment this more into strategic and down to totally operational. The reason I'm pulling this up is when we talk about technology, it's not helpful. Segmenting this into the time horizon, well, does that change the tools? It doesn't. Huh? So it's universal, and so that's why we're mixing these things in this presentation all the time. It doesn't matter. Because you find technology everywhere, and on the other side, you find on every step situations where you don't use technology, and there are good reasons for it, right? So decision making by itself is not limited by time, space, or complexity or whatnot. It really depends on the individual use case.
So far, we've assumed that you actually want to take those decisions in the first place, right? But we also show it's not easy. I would not want to be the guy that designs the timetable. Well, actually, I do like working with public railway puzzles, but let's imagine it's complex. I don't like doing it. Can we not just let the company run? And the issue is, it's like a car. It is driving. The company will run every day. Those trains will depart. Question is, does someone take control? If the planner doesn't do it, might be the train driver doing it. Then they will make a decision. But the company will keep running. The question is, do you sit like the lady in the car, or do you take control? If you want to achieve the best possible results, you will need to take those decisions in the best way possible. You cannot just take a random decision or no decision at all and then have hope as your strategy that you will achieve the best possible results.
And I love this example for another reason. That's just saying, okay, this is where I want to go, and then going to sleep. It's a perfect example of that. The plan is not where it stops. Right, the execution itself. If you go into a traffic jam and you're still sleeping and you might be late, you may not even be on time for wherever you wanted to be. So the whole decision is worthless, right? And that's the idea behind it. So from plan to execution is part of that decision intelligence discussion. And we'll get to that in a second. One more thought before we get there. It's a bloody simple question. What makes a good decision? If you meet someone on the street and you ask people, the interesting thing is there seems to be two very different ways of looking at the quality of a decision, right? If I would ask you, like, is this a good decision? What's the quality? You have two very different ways of looking at it. One is you go by the process and you say, yeah, of course, because it's the best informed decision. I have all the data, I have everything available, so there's no other way how I could decide today because that's the best process. It's everything here where I need it. Whatever the future brings, maybe things turn out badly, you know, something else happens, but you would still say there was a good decision because at that time it was the right thing to do. The other way of looking at it is attribution, yeah, looking back, because you say a decision was good when you can kind of attribute it to a good outcome. Very different way. So it's the process on one side and it's then the outcome on the other side. And of course, there's a mix. The point is, this you cannot really control, right? The future is uncertain, so you can do the best possible now if you need to take a decision, but this is where you have control. So the process is what we will focus on. So next step. Beautiful, the slides give us a story, that's nice. Decision intelligence is a buzzword, right? Intelligence. So we collected the most common buzzwords around that, and Ronald picked a nice broken record picture for that. We have automation, data intelligence, business intelligence. So we all use intelligence, and we do this usually because it's a nice picture. It's, intelligence sounds smart, and people have intelligence. We like this. But what we found is, when we did a little more research on that topic, is that the term intelligence is actually pretty nice. It fits nicely, right? And it's not just a buzzword to be, blurry on what it all contains. We're not trying to come up with a universal definition of decision intelligence, but intelligence, the word by itself, has a few aspects that are really helpful in the whole discussion. The first is, of course, it's a mental capability. It's learning, it's problem solving, it's thinking, it's combining. So the whole fact that it mimics very important parts of the human brain. But it's also a knowledge process. You learn as you go. You consume knowledge. You get new one. You combine it. You do something. You get rid of some. You can filter it. So that is part of intelligence. Very important aspect, and that is also the case here when we talk more about the digital aspects of that word. It's adaptiveness. It's the fact that you can change, that you can adjust. Yeah, that is a very, very important aspect. So you essentially change the system all the time, and that is a big part of intelligence. And the last part, purposefully. You do this for a reason. So that's why we discuss process and outcome. It's always driven by something. It's not randomly. So the point we wanted to make is decision intelligence is not a buzzword. Intelligence is a very good term to kind of summarize the important aspects of what we have here. So how do we take decisions?
Yeah, so it sounds like intelligence is something that needs a process, right? It's something that happens. It takes time. It's not just we pick the left scenario or the right scenario. So we looked a little bit about what does research say about process, and you get the usual textbook definitions that you might have all seen before. It's something with you take an input, data, and then you do a decision, something, and something comes out. That's the output. You know who does what. You know how to measure if you're doing a great job. Done. You've got a process. Simple. It's actually even useful. You got all the usual advantages, like you can measure if you're doing a great job, and you can repeat it, and people don't introduce all their little hacks, personal preferences into the process. It makes sense. Processes are nice. You can also Google for decision-making processes, and then you get a version with 5 steps, 6 steps, 7 steps, 8 steps, and you pick your favorite. I picked the one with 6 because I like the first letters. So it's easy to break it down, right? You need some problem and data, and you find all the possible options. You pick the best option, you execute, and you're done. Super simple. That's the textbook. Problem is, if a human makes those decisions, then you use the human mind, and that has limits. And they all have beautiful names. This is not me inventing them. If you try to use human intelligence, you get stuck for different reasons. One is if you keep doing what you've always done and the world outside you is changing, then you make decisions in the wrong way. You think you're still living in the 90s, you're making your planning like that, but the current energy market doesn't work that way anymore. You might be collecting data all the time, doing smart stuff with machine learning, but never get to the point of making a decision. Or maybe you have so much useful information, but you cannot even process it anymore because it takes a year to read your input data, and then you're too late to make a decision. Maybe you do a great job making the decision, but you do it every day, and you get tired. You get bored, and at some point you don't focus anymore, and as a human you don't keep making the best plan possible, you're not interested anymore. Now, what may also happen is your organization changes, right? So you keep adapting your decision-making process to your organization. At some point, the process is just like a copy or a mirror of your organization. Everything that's wrong in your organization will also be wrong in the decision-making process. You don't reinvent the process. You just keep changing it. Oh, we have another department. Okay, they also need a role. Maybe they can do this part. At some point, the process is not clear. And finally, let's say you've done everything perfectly. You might be that person, and I think that applies to all of you, that has so many different options that it's just impossible to look at all of those and pick the right one. So what do? You're stuck.
Yeah. So, and yeah, then finally we get closer to the title. We look at technology, and it's beautiful because we can use an analogy, a pretty simple one, but it's a nice one because it visualizes a few of the core ideas of technology and its use. Right? It's pretty simple, right? Here's a process that has a very well defined outcome, nice KPI, very clear, no discussion. Yeah, it's how you can actually jump. And I learned this is called the Fosbury flop. So this is a special technique how you can essentially go over that, and then you have a world record. As always, men can do it a little better. And world record for the what is it called, pole vault. Yeah, also same situation. A little more physique helps, but not much. So we are between 5 and 6 meters in height here, and the difference is, well, yes, technology. It's a pole. Hey, it's just a pole. It's a tool, but that's not the point. The pole is not just a tool. So first of all, it's technology awareness. Someone had the idea of using that pole, not a spring, not something else, not a ladder, a pole. So that was the first part. So someone had the idea, okay, this seems to be the perfect tool to get up there. The second part is training. You cannot just take it and say, oh, here's your pole, now jump. That doesn't work, right? So you have to adapt it to the athlete. You have to train, not flop anymore. You do it in a totally different way. So the technology itself changes the process. And that's many times just an afterthought. But it's really important when you look at it in this simple example. It's also the evolvement of technology, the material this pole is made of. Yeah, it's a very special fiber-based material, exactly designed for this very purpose and adapted to the athlete. So I know it's a simple example, but now we're trying to match this to software technology.
Yeah, and also to those psychological limits. So let's say you're not running with a pole, but you're running a company. You might have an airport. Let's say you have 100 check-in desks, but you actually have 150 airlines, and all of those have flights, and they come in every day. You need to decide which airline is using which of the desks. At some point, you don't see how you can add more flights, right? So you start looking at investing $16 million to add additional desks. Do you have to? The reason you're looking at it is because your mind is not able to cope with all the options. You just cannot find the optimal solution anymore, so it's easier to invest. But should you? Or you run a hydropower plant. You actually run multiple plants. First you plan one of them and then the other, but you would like to do integrated planning. But now the energy market keeps changing. Do you stay with your current process of planning, or do you find an integrated solution using technology? Or let's say you run a brewery, or actually more than 250 breweries and over 1,000 distribution centers, the largest brewer in the world, who has a huge supply chain. Do they have any lack of input data? Can they do super nice machine learning? Sure, there's plenty of data. But then what do you do, right? Plenty of data, but how do you use it to make the optimal decision? And that's where technology comes in. So you want to embed all this intelligence, embed all the tools in a process, similar to the people using a pole when they're jumping. And the trick with the pole was that you carefully design this whole process, right? It's not just, let's use it, let's try if we can jump really high, and if we do it 10 times, then we get a new world record. It's engineering, right? So you start looking at what you want to achieve, you look at all the different tools and components that you have available, you have your hypothesis, you test something, you measure, you see, can we further improve, and step by step, you find a process that yields the best outcomes. It's the same thing you want to do with decision making. Right? So you look at all the tools that are there, you look at all the decisions you need to make, the people, the processes, and you try to find the optimal process for making the best decision possible.
Yeah. You might ask, really? Decision intelligence technology, and all you say is process design? Well, yes, sort of, because it depends if you do it right. And one way of looking at it, and this is supposed to be a complex process, but the point is, that there are very specific points in your process that you can identify, yeah, for the use of technology. Let's keep it high level. So the idea that there is a transition between things in that process happening everywhere, and those things need to be found. I know by itself, and you've heard the McKinsey talk, this is, learning that process, understanding it. Sometimes in a company, there's not a single person who knows the whole thing. So that is a challenge by itself. But identifying those points is very important, because that is where you put the technology. Nobody else. And you should not confuse those points. So it's a kind of a textbook. We adapted it a little, but it's kind of a textbook view at process analysis and then design. But there is usually a discipline that is called business analytics. That's all about, the whole data journey to something that you usually call an insight. What is an insight? A useful information, whatever that means for you in terms of your business. This is not deciding. But insight means you've learned something. You have evidence for something. There's something in your data. There's something that gives you the certainty and the support for the process. Do not confuse this with decision making. It's happening all the time that people think, well, I have a trend, so that kind of gives me a natural decision. No, it gives you data. It gives you insights. But what that means, what you should do, can be a totally different thing. And it's a good idea to have this separated in such a process, right? That you have this separated from the idea that from an insight, you need to plan. I mean, planning is like, a mental capability, thinking into the future and then kind of anticipating what is going to happen. So a plan has two important ingredients, right? It's all the rules, so that that is rather easy. The second part is way more difficult. That is the expectations. What do you think will happen? Nobody can look into the future, so you have to live with that uncertainty. But there's this process of transforming these insights. So the combinations of the rules, some are learned, but most of them are pretty obvious, and then the prediction, the expectation into that. And that is, in most cases, called advanced planning, where you kind of automate this, where you add technology here. But we've seen it in the self-driving car. It doesn't stop there. If you just throw a plan over the fence, well, good luck. That doesn't work. So part of that process, and in many, many cases, it's not, or it's separated in the organization so that those people don't talk to each other. But there's the execution part. So the question is, how is what you plan for, is that really properly executed? Can it be executed? So having this transition point here, somewhere in the process, and making sure that the thinking behind this will actually work is important as well. So let's look at those transition points, right? So it's a very simple way of analyzing a process, not going through the whole thing, but really trying to find those and think about adding technologies. So first one, from data to insight. Nice way of looking at it: hindsight, insight, foresight. And the more you do this, the better you get at looking at the future. But of course, it's a classical way, and we've tried to put it into the simplest possible structure to summarize the whole thing. Of course, there's the data journey here. It's a lot of work. It can be really a lot, especially if the company has been around for a long time. Lots of data coming in all kinds of sources. Many companies are struggling here and having their data strategy and trying to build everything into a data warehouse, data lake house, whatever. So trying to find a kind of a common structure that then can be used. But then usually we have two ways of working on that data, and mostly humans do this. Some can be automated. One is classical visual analysis, right? So you bring it into something that the human mind can process. Business intelligence, also known as shiny dashboards. So the idea that you put your data into a form that allows decision makers to kind of see it, see the structure, understand something, and then use this for decision making. But you also have the statistical analysis. It's not shiny dashboards. There are lots of mathematical stuff in here. It's been around for a long time. I used to give lectures on data mining 15 years ago, back in the days that it was called data mining, but it's the same thing. So it's essentially the idea that you can run statistical stuff on a computer, and that usually allows you to discover something. And hopefully something you didn't know before, because otherwise, why would you want to? So you find something in your data. You find correlations, relationships, things that seem to depend on each other, maybe. Patterns that you didn't see. You can group data, or you can try to have less data by reducing it to the things that are really helpful. If 10 things explain the same thing, then maybe you don't need 10. So essentially on that journey, this is the way how you can process that data, but it gets to a point where you say, okay, now I've learned something. And that allows me to have a better way of anticipating the future, usually called predictive modeling. And it's an expert task. It's the question of, okay, how much of this then is in here so that you can create a prediction, a forecast of what you expect the future to be. Again, nothing has been decided yet. This is just what has to be done in order to get to a more structured decision making, or what we then call decision intelligence. So the best outcome of this is through using all these tools to get to the best possible expectation you can have at the time you do it. And then, this is one of my favorite XKCD comics. The question is, okay, what do I want? Yeah? Just because I know what the weather will be tomorrow by the minute doesn't mean that I know what to do. Highly depends on who I am, what my job is, and so on. And what I like about this cartoon is that it tells you that the same information, so you have, let's say you have some data about, so this is a beach, this is, okay, I should explain this. This is a beach, someone is drowning, and there are some lifesavers, and there's an ice cream booth. And the decision is now where to put the lifesaver. Where's the booth? Where's the place where you watch the beach? And then you can look at your data, right? You know all the incidents from the past. And so, what do you want? And I think this is a nice visualization of whether or not this is a good decision where you place this booth for the lifesavers. It really depends on perspective, right? If you just say, hey, let's do a simple approach, let's just go by distance. Well, distance might be an obvious measure, but it's not the fastest way to rescue, because you're obviously a lot faster on sand than in water. So maybe you should rather look at this path, that you minimize time, and that you only swim the last part. Or maybe you try to swim even less, right? You go over here, but then you discover it's not the only constraint that you have. You like ice cream. Most of the day you will not be rescuing. So maybe that should also be taken into consideration. The point is taking the right data, but then asking, okay, what is the right perspective to qualify or to find a measure for the quality of the decision? That's the key part. So these objectives need to be part of that, and you need to have a kind of a process to learn what do we want. That's the key question. For some problems it's pretty obvious. For some it's really difficult. For some it's nearly impossible, because an organization by itself is full of contradictions. Yeah? That's absolutely normal. A company can have different perspectives and optimize in different directions. That's perfectly fine. Sometimes it's even designed that way. So putting that all together, and then usually you have, this is also, again, the simplest possible structure we could come up with. Usually you start here. You collect everything manually. You put it into some system, world's largest ERP system. Yeah, you use something that works well and can be handled by a single person. And then at some point you go to the next level. You say, okay, well, we have some computer guys here, and we can build something, and maybe a little algorithm applying a certain strategy can already give us something nice. So heuristics, smart strategies, something in a computer that computes something that might be a lot better than what you can come up manually. You don't have any idea of how good you are, but it's already something. Or the other way of doing it is you build some sort of simulation, and you play with the simulation. That doesn't necessarily guarantee that you get to close to your objective, but at least it's something you can play with. And there are complex systems out there where simulating it and pushing it then and essentially turning the knobs on the simulation model is the best you can do. But obviously that works, but you never know how good you really are. And that is if people ask me, okay, so then why prescriptive and why optimization with a mathematical foundation? Well, the answer is simple. Because the things you had to guess here, you can prove here. That's the beauty of math. You can prove optimality. That's the point. So it's not just that you have a solution, you also use the system, use the model to reason. That's what happens. A solver creates essentially a proof that looks like a telephone book. Yeah, because then that, and that, and that, and that, and that, and that. So totally different, difficult to understand for humans, but very, very valuable in terms of solution quality. Good. So, okay, insight to plan.
Cool. We have
What's
a
next?
plan. We have a plan. The guy is still drowning. Right? So what do? We need to execute. And there we can also use technology. The first thing is super obvious, right? it depends a lot on how you communicate the plan, whether people are also able to understand what they should do, execute it properly. Communication needs to be on time, right? If you distribute a schedule every day and you want to reschedule during the day, then what do? That's where you introduce apps or other fancy things. You also want your people to be aligned with the objectives of your company. If you give a plan that minimizes distance, but your driver actually wants to minimize, total driving time, he might stop early, take a different route. He doesn't execute your schedule. So the next thing you also want to do is monitor, right? So you want to look at how are we executing the plan and does it match with the plan? You can call that adherence. It's not the holy grail. It's not just about executing what you planned. It's also about looking at the bottom line results. Remember one of the slides where we said process versus outcome? Sure, there is a plan, but executing it perfectly while ignoring the outside world, that's not a good plan. You might also want to need to have continuous adjustment for that reason, right? If you see that the outside world changes, then adherence is not what you should focus on. You should make sure that you have a new plan, which again optimizes the results. You can use technology. And then, of course, you want to validate the model that's behind all your decision making. You need to continuously check, is my input data correct? Are my objectives still representing the company objectives? Validation analysis. Now, this looks like a completely different step. It's quite similar to the previous, because there is still decisions being made, but in a shorter time frame, often about minimizing changes instead of redoing the full optimization. And you're learning in a different way. So we're not just learning from a full model about reality and then take a good decision. We're learning about plan versus reality. But it's still learning, it's still decision making. So let's throw a little bit of intelligence into that mix. And if we look at the process that we showed earlier, but now not as a circle, but as a line, we typically see two types of intelligence. One is data intelligence, and that is focused on, we have data, it's from the past, now we can learn about the future. We don't decide, we just learn and we start understanding. So the meaning of model, specifically here, is that we try to make a model that fits the data, that explains the data. That's the optimization we're doing. And we can call that inductive. So it means we have data, and from the data we learn new things, right? Inductive. And the technology is then called machine learning. The other thing, not opposite but complementary, is decision intelligence, which is about what do we do, right? Data intelligence is about what happened to me from the outside world. Decision intelligence is, okay, so what do we do? How do we respond? The model is different. Now the model is the truth, or at least the truth as we know it, the best we could come up with. And we use it to make a decision. That's called deductive, right? So the model is done, and now we just look at the model, or we use technology, and we find, based on the model, what's the optimal decision. And that's where you use mathematical optimization. Inductive happens from data to insights. Deductive happens from insight to plan, and further. Does it mean intelligence must be embedded in a system, no human intervention at all anymore? No, it's two completely separate things. You have different levels of intelligence and you have different levels of automation. So you might have aquaculture farming, one Gurobi customer. You have a lot of human knowledge about this whole process of breeding fish, right? So you cannot just put everything in a computer and hope that it gives you the exact optimal solution that a planner would give. But it can provide support. Gurobi can say, I would do this, this, or this, and you make up your mind and take a decision. If you're planning the National Football League, that's super complex. So you need to look at hundreds of scenarios one by one. But you cannot make all of those manually. So you can ask a machine to make the planning. You look at the scenario, you give your feedback, and the computer will take over and generate the next scenario, and you keep doing this. So it's still the human making the decision, but it's the technology coming up with the proposal. Or maybe you do food delivery, and you have customer orders coming in all the time of the day. We do this a lot. And you want to assign a driver to deliver the food to the customer. Customer cannot wait for 15 minutes for you to have time to make a plan, right? You cannot wait for a human planner. That has to happen every 30 seconds for every big city in your country. That's where you need automation, no human involved, just let the computer do the magic. Okay, so we've looked at many perspectives, right? We've looked at the process perspective, the different types of technology that you can use, types of intelligence. So now let's finally look at some proof that this can actually be done and that it's cool. So one example, let's say you are managing cash machines, ATMs, and you are the company that is responsible for delivering new money to the ATM, or if people can also bring their cash, then you also need to get it out of the machine. Sounds easy, right? Super complex. There's rules about what kind of coins and paper can be in the machine. There's rules about that you cannot visit the same ATM 3 days in a row. There's the routing itself, which makes it complex. So you need intelligence, but you actually need both types of intelligence, the two halves of the brain. So the first one is, do I know what my customers will do? Is the Tuesday a busy day for people withdrawing money, or is it Wednesday? Is it the morning or the afternoon? When is that thing empty? That's where you use data intelligence, but you don't have a plan. You need decision intelligence to then figure out which of my vehicles is driving to each of the ATMs on which part of the day to bring additional money. And companies that do this, they save a lot on the amount of trips they have to do, the amount of cash they have to put in the machine, because they know.
So we're trying to get you into that mindset of seeing this flow in this process. Another well-known example called EasyPark. You thought this is just an app that does the payment for you.
Yes.
No. it's a lot more. And what it also does is it collects data, because the fact that you're using it means you're parking. And a lot more input. So there's a system that learns something about cars, where they are, and what you as the user, what do you want? You want a damn parking slot. Yeah, just give me some free space. So what they have come up with is a system that guides you to a free parking slot based on lots of information that can be learned. So this is an application where this thing becomes kind of a digital assistant. You are the decision maker, which is I want to decide where to park, but where are my options? So yeah, very very late in the process, so you ask a system to give you some guidance in not driving around all the time, but doing it. Huh? Another one that I really like, because it's in this plan to execution transition point, is the example of Air France. So if you book a flight, you can do a seat reservation, but you may all have noticed that sometimes you get a new seat because equipment change, I think it's called. Yeah, and why is that? Well, there are planes, and of course there's an initial plan on how your fleet is assigned to the schedule. But of course, then bookings come in, and some flights are totally booked and some are not. So there's a replanning happening all the time. Like, can we use a smaller airplane, one with less fuel consumption? That's all something you've learned from data. The only problem is it's similar to the train example. You cannot just say, oh, well, we take the big airplane here somewhere in the schedule, right? It has implications across the whole schedule. So this replanning, it saves a lot of money. And the number by Air France was roughly 1% of fuel. 1% of fuel for whole Air France, right? Just because that plan to execution phase, this continuous replanning, this adjusting to a change of the data situation makes a difference. And that's also where Gurobi is used, right? So we're trying to show you a little bit the spectrum of these use cases. And then I think it's time to do a little recap to give you these takeaways. And it fits nicely into the structure of this morning. Yes, it's a journey. We've all used the word journey many times. But we have these 4 points, and we'll quickly go through them. Traditionally at university, you learn data-driven decision-making and model-driven decision-making, like this is A and this is B. But it's always the combination. So if you think about data-driven, then the model is missing. Yeah, there's the deductive part is not complete. That's the key part. Second part is the process perspective. We will talk about that in a minute. Yeah, and then just like the pole, it's not just taking it, using it, and off to a new world record. That's not how it works, right? So that the technology adoption, if you like, so selection, testing, that's all part of the process. It's never a plug-in thing for a quick improvement. Sometimes yes, I know we have this in some of our case studies. It was so quick and so easy, but reality is, of course, it takes a few experts and sometimes a few more days to give you the benefits. And then the question of benchmark. Technical teams have a tendency, and I'm guilty as charged, to like technology. That's a cool thing. It's a toy. You can build it, and it's really, really, really nice. And then the question is, okay, and then you're calling Gurobi and you're saying, hey, we want to use your product, and the only thing left is I need to convince my manager. So how do you do this? And the important part is that technology by itself, and you can quote me, technology by itself has no value, right? It's the integration of the technology that creates the value. Something is done in a much better way so that the business itself benefits from it. And that's the benchmark, the only real benchmark that technology can have. If you like, this is, so as a kind of a mental plug-in, this whole journey always has the elements of a crime story. There's this collecting evidence part, right, from data in this part. So you learn something. You collect evidence, you see what you got. So here's where you learn something. What happened, what could have happened, all these things. But then at some point you all know Sherlock Holmes, right? Deduction, Watson, deduction. Yeah? That's exactly what happens there. Based on these observations, based on these insights, then the question is really what to do next. Do we have to interrogate someone? Do we have to, how is the investigation going on? Always have both sides. Sometimes I read stories where this is all of it. It's like, yeah, we looked at all the data and now our decision-making got a lot better. Really? And sometimes it's here like, well, the demand prediction, we got this from some guy in the other department. That might be true. So that's what we base our planning on. So that part might be, a little oversight. So the crime story is how I like to remember that both elements are equally important. You've seen the graph with the transition points. One point that I'd like to make here is this is kind of the flow of, the value chain of information, if you like. But the process design should go in reverse direction, right? So you start with what makes a proper execution. And then you go back to, okay, so what is the process and the transition from the plan there need to be? And then you go back to what do I really need? It's the big data versus lean data discussion until you get here, right? So both directions are important, and those are the critical elements in the process during analysis and, of course, during design.
Yep. So, like we also said, you're not there when you just select technology and then install it on a laptop. Someone writes a cool Python script, gets the Excel files, run, done. This needs to be integrated, right? Technically integrated, meaning that the data flows automatically into your planning model, but also outside. But at least as important, business integration, right? People need to adapt their process. So you use technology as part of the process, as we've shown. If you just introduce technology, nothing really changes. At some point, nobody wants to use it anymore. And decision-making, like we said, that's engineering. And the fun thing with engineering is it's kind of research, it just never stops. It's not just you get a request as an optimization person, can you build a model for my business? And you build that model and you install it and you're done. Because then organization changes, objectives change, availability of new data changes, quality of the data changes, or the technology changes, right? Suddenly there's this cool new solver which can do things that you could never do before. Okay, do you stick with the process as you designed it, or should you keep adapting that process? So it's a continuous thing, and it's not just finished when you introduce your new tool. And that's all the summary points for now, I think. So it is a journey. Introducing mathematical optimization is not a one-shot thing. You might be somewhere on the top of the hill already. You might be halfway to introducing mathematical optimization. You might still consider doing it. Hopefully you have the right tool for getting up that icy mountain. Otherwise, let's talk. Kostja.
Thank you. So, and before I hand it over to Jan and Dave to continue with the journey part, this is what we're here for, and it's exactly what you said this morning. Everybody in this room is on the same journey. Yeah, might be a little different. Might be, some is a little more rocky, some is a little more sunny. But it's the same thing. And honestly, if I look back at the last, I don't know how long we've been doing this, but the fact that I can now stand here and talk about these things like pretty confident is the fact that many, many people shared their story about the journey, that you participate in these discussions, and that you can help people push it forward. So use the opportunity. Thanks for being with us today. Hope this was useful, and thank you very much.
Thank you.